Thank you everybody for coming tonight. We are so excited to have you. And as Carla said, feel free to unmute during those discussions or use that chat box. Again, if you have any comments or questions or issues, please send that to me. I'll be monitoring the chat today and making sure everything gets addressed. And I will present it to Carla if she doesn't see it at a break or a downtime. This session is going to be recorded, so we will be sending you a link in a couple days. Feel free to share that link with your colleagues that you think may enjoy it, or rewatch it as many times as you want. Use it however you need. All right, so let's go ahead and begin by welcoming you to our webinar today, Geography as a Disciplinary Lens. I'm excited to see all the places we're going to go today with Miss Carla Weinhold. She is currently teaching 7th grade world history in Northeast Maryland. She's a nationally board certified teacher in the area of literacy and has been since 2007. She's also taught elementary grades 1 through 4, as well as other middle school grades, I believe also, Carla, in social studies for the past 13 years. And I just found out she's been teaching for 27 years total.
23.
Oh.
Still have a little bit ways to go till I retire.
Getting close though. Yes. You're high. You have more than I do right now. She also works with social studies school service with their ActiveClassroom and Young Citizens program. She is a multifaceted teacher, and we're super excited to have her here today. I am Melissa Knowles, and I am going to be your co-host tonight. Carla, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Melissa. Good evening, everyone. Hopefully everybody had a great day in the classroom with their students and connecting with them. And my goal for tonight is to give you some tips or strategies that you can take back and use with your students even as early as tomorrow. So as Melissa said, my name is Carla Weinhold. I am currently a 7th grade ancient history teacher. I'm about 25 miles north of Baltimore. As Melissa said, I've taught elementary school, I've taught middle school over my 23-year career. My passion has always been history, and I always was that elementary teacher who would try to find as many creative moments that I can bring in history into my reading and writing classroom. I even tried to be creative to get it into math and would stretch out those social studies units when I taught elementary school and kind of shorten the science units as much as I could so that I could spend as much time helping my kids kind of connect with the past. I love our topic for tonight because I think looking at history and geography just naturally lend itself to helping our students understand historical events and see how they connect to our lives today. So as I had said earlier, I would really like to make this an interactive webinar. There are some times where I want us to actually have a discussion, whether it's in the chat or unmute, just so we can kind of have that understanding of where everybody's coming from, because I think some of the activities work better when we discuss a little bit. So our first activity is going to be a discussion activity. So I want you to look at the 5 images on the screen. And I want you to imagine that you have an unlimited vacation budget. So money is no option. And I want you to think about, where would you go on that vacation? So either unmute and share, put it in the chat. Where would you want to go of the places that I have on the screen? I know for me, this beach location is where I want to be. Like, I want to be on the beach somewhere. I like, Tina wants to go to the lake house. Ooh, the first house made of stone. Interesting. Definitely, Lorna, I'm definitely with you. Put me on a beach somewhere. But then I want you to think about, why did you not pick some of the others? So for example, I'm not going to pick that ski mountain lodge. I don't like it cold. Yes, I live in Maryland and we've had snow and ice lately, but I don't like to be cold. But then I look at the little tent, and I'm like, I think that's a little too remote and there's no water to kind of float in. So share with me why you didn't pick one of the others. Oh, I love that. Kind of connecting to where you're from. Thank you for sharing that. Melinda, I have to agree with you. I think I could listen to the waves. Someday when I retire, I'm hoping that I can be somewhere where I can open my window or my door and just hear the waves all day long. Oh, interesting. Karen's like, no cold, no sand.
I'm going to talk because when I'm in class and my students won't talk to me, it drives me batty. But I would like to go to the lake house because I imagine there's lots of activities there for my family to do.
Oh, I love that connection. And I want you to think about if you were to do something like this with your students. I like doing this activity. I like getting them thinking, and I like going beyond just why that spot. And I want them to connect why not the others. It has them look at things in a different way. And then I ask my students, so how did the geography impact you? So for example, if you didn't pick the tent in the desert, maybe it's because it didn't have the water there. Or it might be the climate that impacted where you wanted to go. It could be your culture. So I think it was Lorna said, I miss being from the Caribbean. So that cultural connection, so many aspects of our life and social studies can be looked at from different perspectives, including geography and culture. So I look, if I was going to do this with my students, this could connect to human or even physical geography. So human geography with migrations. Why are people migrating? What's influencing that decision to be able to migrate? If you do this activity, you can look at this from a U.S. history perspective of that westward expansion or that settlement. Or if you're looking at the colonization. So if I have the choice to start my colony in a mountain area, in a wooded area, in a beach area, but having them look at how you can bring in the geography to impact that decision as well. Now, pre-COVID, I would do this activity with my students, have them go to a corner, come up with the pros and the cons. This time when I did it earlier in the year, I do this with ancient civilizations and where would they like to settle, like the kind of feature where they would want to create their own settlement. And I had them go to the breakout room. So if they picked the mountain, then the breakout room was titled mountain location. So you can do the same thing as a tabletop discussion. So now I want us to think about, so the last one was, where would you just go on vacation? But now I want you to look at, where would you like to live? A lot of us, our decisions could or would change because it's somewhere where I'm going to be all the time versus somewhere I would just like to visit. So anybody's decision, how many decisions would change if it was, where would you live? Because I think if I was going to live, the lake might be an option for me if I'm just going to live there. And I like, Tina, how you said there's kind of more activities to do, because I do have kids too, and I would want them to be busy doing things. I even think the little stone lodge would be fun to live in. I definitely would not want to live in the middle of the desert because I think the resources I would need would change. Joanne, what did you say, Joanne, the first time?
She said desert.
Okay. And then now you would love being closer to the water. Go ahead, Joanne.
Yeah, I would not pick the desert. So I picked the stone house for the vacation because I thought it looked cozy, and I live near the ocean and on a river, so I don't need the lake or the river. But if I were to live, I'd want it to be near water.
Okay. I love that you're all making those connections and using kind of geography and things that would impact your decision. Now, if I do
Did you
this,
see Melinda's, Carla? I'm sorry to interrupt.
no.
I think I would like to live in the stone house due to no traffic and no thump thump music.
Yeah.
But culture, that was funny.
But it's funny because I look at where I've lived. I lived in a very suburban area. I could get to grocery stores and things really quickly. And then we moved, like it's really far. We moved like 15 minutes away from. So it's like, I have to go all the way back into Bel Air if I need something. And it's so funny because my perception of things have changed as like the older I get and the more, and I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of good by myself. So I do this activity with my students as well. And when they're in their breakout rooms, if I'm pre-COVID or in person with my kids, I'm standing in the middle of the room and they as a group have to convince me why I should come live in their house and why not to go in others. So it's a great way to start teaching my kids how to give evidence and counter evidence without them really having to kind of write, and it's that great transitional at the beginning of the year. So I love doing this when I'm starting out with civilizations, which leads us to our next piece. So a lot of people don't realize how much geography has impacted the way people have lived for thousands of years. So if you think about a story when you're in your classroom with your children or with your own personal children and you're reading a book, you have to know the setting of the story to kind of understand what's going on. And I know Melissa's, the library teacher, is like, oh, yes, they have to be able to connect to that setting. This applies to social studies as well. In order to truly understand what's happening in history, we have to understand the setting. We have to understand how geography impacts it. So social studies and geography frame each other and it impacts why people act the way they do. So if you think about ancient Greece, so if you look on the map in Europe, if you look at ancient Greece and you look at the geography of Greece, why do the Greeks have to rely so heavily on the sea? Well, because they have to look at that 80% of the land is mountains. So in order for my students to really understand how Greek culture developed, I need them to understand how the geography shaped the way that they developed, that they had to be relying on the sea. They had to rely on the sea for food and for trade to get the things that they need. Even if you look at where the early civilizations were developed. If you look at India and China and Mesopotamia and Egypt, all four of these early civilizations all developed near a water source so they would have that for fertile water or fertile soil and water. They intentionally settle there. If you think about as people settle and expand, people settled near water. So why history and geography? Because we know that there are multiple disciplines in the social sciences, but this is not anything new. Even dating back to the 1960s, there was a gentleman named Immanuel Kant who made, and I'm going to read a quote from his source. He said, geography and history make up the entire circumference of our perceptions. Geography impacts the thought of space and history of that of time. And I think looking at that together, that space and that time together, really impacts and can help our kids truly understand the history that they're studying. So even early geographers, if we connect back to ancient Greece, Ptolemy, they were always looking at geography and connecting that to history. So there's another article called Geographic Perspective to Enrich History by Sarah Bednays, and I quote her a little bit later, that she talks about how we need to understand the past and the present and geography and all how they're interconnected. And then if you're not familiar, we have a blog through Social Studies School Service. And this is one that he kind of mentioned, Ken Kleiman mentioned, about connecting social studies and geography together. And even if we go all the way back to our early primary grades when we're focusing on teaching them about community, they need to know how their community developed. I know we have our Young Citizens program, and they do a lot with teaching the children and the students about their community and why certain things happen. There's a lot of initiatives for students to get involved in their community and be active in their community. And we want our students to understand that nature and the world around them impacts their life. We've had to modify or change our things. We have to change our clothing to fit the environment that's around us. And then if even as simple as natural disasters and how those long-term weather patterns can impact different communities. I know that when we start looking at Greece and we talk about the earthquakes and the volcanoes and things that are erupting in the Mediterranean region, they always want to talk about, well, we're still having those today, but then we talk about the technologies to alert us that ancient civilizations didn't necessarily have. And then looking at how humans have changed the world to fit their needs and how they've modified the world to meet their needs. And then we need to be able to look at the space around us and make those connections in the world. Mike, great. We learn best when we can connect information. I always tell my students, your brain's like a filing cabinet. The more little folders in your brain that you can file and make connections to, the easier it is to recall that information. So the more connections connecting social studies and history and geography and all of those disciplines together and teaching our students that they are interconnected can help them be successful, especially as they're moving forward. So there are benefits to look at this interdisciplinary approach. And I think a lot of teachers naturally look at subject areas in an interdisciplinary way, but I think that so many teachers are historians and not necessarily in looking at history as an interdisciplinary approach. When we're looking at facts and figures, even in our teacher training, it's typically been focused on history and not necessarily the geography. And as teachers, we need to help our students see the cause and effect relationship that geography and history have with each other. So if we look at this idea of examining and solving problems, being able to teach our students to use those maps to see how did historians pick that particular river to settle along versus a different river. And if we want them to develop a more comprehensive understanding, even if you think about some of the battles in the Revolutionary War, why did the Battle of Bunker Hill happen where it did? Why did the Battle of Gettysburg happen at that particular point? So looking at these historical events and finding out how and why and the deeper meaning that you can go in. I know when I teach my students about a lot of the wars in Greece and in Rome, and we start looking at why they happened on the water, they're not surprised when we start talking about the Persian Wars and why Greece and Rome first fought on the water, because the Greeks were relying on the sea. And then if you look geographically for Rome, where Rome was and where Carthage was on the northern coast of Africa, it made sense to the quickest route would be for Carthage to travel by water. But then that didn't work. So then they had to come up with a plan B and look at how that geography was. So it's important for us as many opportunities as we can to be able to incorporate as many of the different disciplines, specifically history and geography. So then how do you do that? We know that a lot of our curriculum sources will sometimes say, here's the facts, here's the event, and look at it. And we want to look at events from multiple perspectives. So start by taking that historical event and creating guiding questions, getting our kids that inquiry approach, but take those inquiry questions from a geographical perspective. So if we're teaching about the Silk Road, so where did the Silk Road begin? Just focusing on location. Or where is the Nile River located? What direction does the Nile River flow? I know my students are always amazed that it flows south to north. And then tying in the second geographical theme, which is place. and having them look at in what ways did landforms and climates affect China affect the journey in the Silk Road. And then if we look at human and environmental interaction, how did the pioneers change their Oregon Trail as they move westward? I know that one of my teachers in 8th grade loves bringing in the Oregon Trail game. So he brings in the interactive game, and he actually, pre-COVID, turned it into an interactive game that they would spend for like 15 minutes the first part of every class, and he would have it live. He'd be like, hey, he's like, they had a drought at that table and all of your food's now gone. And the kids would be like, what? What do you mean? So, but making it and making that connection and understanding. Looking at movement. How did the mountains and seas impact trade for Greece? And then looking at region. How are the regions of Sparta and Athens different if I'm studying Greece? So being able to look at how geography impacted that Athens was opening to trade because they were closer to the coast versus Sparta was more inland and was self-reliant on themselves. And then once you get those guiding questions, then you can start gather those primary and secondary sources to be able to answer those questions and be able to integrate the themes. So looking at charts and maps, looking at reading sources and things, so not just relying on maps. A lot of our students think, oh, it's geography, I'm looking at a map. Okay, well, we need to start teaching our students to go beyond the map and start looking at geography and some of our other sources as well. So Nystrom World is an excellent source that you can use that have resources available to you. So this is the page for when you log into Nystrom World, and it has the geographer, it has all these, the researcher, the explorer, and I love these because it's connecting to different ways to think about geography. So it's not just, here's a map, I'm going to draw a map, I'm going to label the routes, I have to know the bodies of water, I have to know the capitals. It's taking them beyond those things to higher levels, to analyzing those different maps and looking at that information. So the first thing is, so Meredith, I'm going to show you some ActiveClassroom things, but then I'm going to show you some Nystrom World things that you can go back and kind of maybe pitch to some people in your department that you might be able to add in some of those resources. So if you have Nystrom World and ActiveClassroom, some of the things overlap between the two, so you might be able to access some of the both things. So hopefully I can show you some things and maybe your district can add in a few other things for you. All right, so the first one that I really like is this geographer. And I like the geographer because it gives me the ability as the teacher, we can build these maps together. I can add borders and physical features, so political features. And I like that I can vary the level. And there's US history and there was world history. There's a lot of features that you can be able to add. And then what I like is you can layer things so they can see different features. And then you have this toolbox where they can type, they can measure the scale, they can draw things, put shapes on things. I love the pin so they can look at features. So this is for them to be able to build that map, and that could be something where you're looking at explorers and what route did they take, and they could be building this map as a group, tracking the journey that that explorer took. So the researcher I like, and this is something that you can, as the teacher, assign the atlases to your students. And some of us in the virtual world are kind of sad because I miss my kids having, I'm going to grab mine, I miss my kids actually grabbing an atlas and turning the pages and looking at maps. And we have the ability to do that in the researcher. You can assign the atlases and the pages actually turn like they would turn in a book. And you can have them zoom in and look at features. So there's all sorts of, there's atlases on US history, there's atlases on world history, there's a variety of atlases. So your students can't see it unless you assign the atlas to them. But then they have access to all of the pages. And this is something that's in Nystrom World as well as in ActiveClassroom. So if you have ActiveClassroom, you have these atlas features as well as you can in Nystrom World. So, and then we've got, yes, I love all of the atlases. I don't think I found one that I didn't like. I think they're all very kid-friendly and the information is appropriately leveled. And I teach 7th grade and I have a wide range of students, and we can always take a look at that. Even my lowest learners can always take a look at that information. And then we have this Explorer section, and this is some of the newer things where it's mapping our world and looking at different features. I love mapping United States history. It's very similar to that first feature where you can build your map, but these are activities that are already pre-set up for you, telling them to analyze this map of where the different battles of the Persian War happened. And then they can build that map as they're learning. So I've used the mapping of world history to assess a topic. Like after we've gone through all of a unit, I've said, okay, you're going to work with your breakout room and you're going to build this map and have them go through. It's those same features like you would have in the geographer, but they're kind of set up themed by content, whether it's like more of geography or connecting history and world history. So I love these as well. In the ActiveClassroom, we have new ones that kind of tie in with the coronavirus and mapping the coronavirus. And we have ones during the elections when they were mapping different features of what was happening with the elections. So it's a great way to connect geography and what's happening in the world for your students. So I do want to share some of the ActiveClassroom series, and just like you can request a trial in Nystrom World, you can also request one in ActiveClassroom. So this is kind of the little toolbar that you can see. This is from the teacher view, but your students would see activities and assignments, and then here's those atlases that just like you assigned in Nystrom World, you can also assign in ActiveClassroom. And then that mapping activity you can also assign in this maps area as well. And then your students would have discussion. They would not see the managed students usage reports and then curriculum maps. But some of the Atlas series that you can use, the World History and US History, the Desk Atlas, the World Atlas, those are all things that you can use. And I like the way Social School Service brings in art and history and all these timelines and other features. It's not just analyzing maps. And my kids always go, wait, there's a picture in here. And I said, yes, we can look and talk about history and geography all from lots of different perspectives. And there are 2 PowerPoint series that you can use. And I like these because they're on a topic, but you can use them in whole, or you can use them in smaller pieces. So there's a backward planning PowerPoint that has to do with the Black Death. I think there's one on the Black Death. I know there's one on backwards planning Rome. So it has stuff from the Roman Republic all the way through the Roman Empire. So if I only want to use the Roman Empire slides, then I only show that piece to my students. And just like there's like history focused, there's also geography focused ones. There are 2 video series, and I love the video series because they're anywhere from 2 or 3 minutes to like 6 minutes to 20 minutes. And for my students, showing a 2-minute video clip can help introduce that topic and connect. And then there are 2 series that I absolutely love. So the C3 series really follows the format of the C3 framework and already gives you the resources that you need and has that focus to go through. So the first one is this one that I use with my students in the fall is looking at the Nile and then how did it make Egypt great? So being able to have a group of students just focus on history or just civics, economics, and geography. And you could do this as a jigsaw. So they start in their expert group and then they can move and you have a history, a civics, and economics and geography. And then together they're addressing that question. So you're looking at it from multiple perspectives. So I love this C3 series because it really does bring all of the disciplines together from looking at this same topic. And then the next series that I have not had the privilege of using with my students, but I have interacted with it at different trainings. It's this zombie-based geography. And I like because it starts out with a graphic novel. And for some of the students, the graphic novel right away is going to hook them in. For some of your other students, the fact that it's a zombie attack is going to hook some of your students. So they use different elements of geography and history to solve this zombie apocalypse that is coming in. And you can use bits and pieces of the lesson. So this one looks at the different types of maps in lesson number 2. So you can interact with some of these pieces to help your kids see the connection between history and social studies and geography. So here is that quote that I referenced early by Sarah Benars that I wanted you to really think about. It's impossible to understand the present without understanding geography. It's impossible to understand the present without understanding the past. And it's impossible to understand the past without understanding geography. I think it's just very powerful to think of how all of these disciplines are connected together and that cause and effect relationship that they have with each other, and then using that cause and effect relationship to be able to help our students understand what's happening in the world around them, whether it's geography, human geography, physical geography, or US history or ancient history or even modern world history. So I'd be happy to take any questions. I know Melissa shared the Nystrom World trial. Melissa, can you share with them the ActiveClassroom? Because it looks like it's the link for Nystrom World.
Oh, well, okay. I'm on ActiveClassroom. I think I accidentally pasted, but then when I went back to it, I don't think it copied correctly. Anyway, here is the correct one. Thank you.
So now they're both together. So if you would like more opportunity to interact with Nystrom resources and see how that connects with your students, go ahead and ask for that trial. If you have not had any experience with ActiveClassroom, it's very similar to Nystrom World. With the setup, that's the one thing I like with Socially School Service is their platforms of Young Citizen, ActiveClassroom, and Nystrom World have some similar functionality.
Yes.
So I want you to think about everything that we talked about tonight, and I want you to share either how your thinking has been changed or how your thinking was confirmed, or even something as simple as what you can take back and use with your students tomorrow. And I can't take credit for this closing. I did borrow this from another one of our webinar presenters from a couple years ago. It was just something that's very powerful. And I've actually used this with my students. When we've talked about history and culture, I'm like, how was your thinking changed today? How has your thinking been confirmed? And we're going to do this tomorrow in my classroom when we talk about the development of Christianity. Because so many of my students come in with these preconceived notions of what Christianity is and how it developed in Rome. And I want them to think, how did that information kind of change your thinking?
Okay, Carla, Melinda Tuff asks, how do we know which program our district has subscribed to?
I would say that would be a question for your district coordinator and just share. I went to a webinar and they were showing me some features on Nystrom World and ActiveClassroom. Can you tell me what features we have? Because I would really like this one, and this one.
Yeah. And as far as sharing our name with the district, I'm going to give you an email for Pam Gothard. She is our professional learning director, and she will get you in contact with your sales representative who will talk with your curriculum supervisor. And it may very well be that they already are in communication with our sales team. So that would be great.
Yes, because Pam's name is going to have lots more weight than my name or Melissa's name.
Yes.
Well, I actually, it's only been like two of our myself and another teacher who's actually got the Nystrom World connected, and then they bought it from our one school, and our other school doesn't have it, but our curriculum person has said that we are the ones to reach out. So I know that we have Nystrom World, but I've never heard of ActiveClassroom.
If you like Nystrom World, let me tell you, you will love ActiveClassroom.
But we're changing our whole, like they want us to find resources for our curriculum. And when I looked at ActiveClassroom, you have so much more that we want. We just can't find the resources that we want. And I didn't know Nystrom had this other, or social study. I didn't know you had this other part.
Yeah.
And they can work together. You can have a link to Nystrom World in your ActiveClassroom, so it's not double places to go. Mike had a comment also, Carla. I think it's important to teach from a geography perspective instead of just glancing over it to get the good stuff.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many teachers that don't have that or don't want to take that time to use geography. And it really does impact the way certain things have developed in history. I think that's a perfect way to say that.
And Lorna, have you used ActiveClassroom? It says lots of activities to keep students engaged, and you're absolutely right.
Sorry. No, but I am very familiar with the Atlas. I used to use it in a previous school that I taught in, a DOE school in the city, New York City. Mm-hmm. And I also got some samples when I went to social studies, little workshop, those 2-day conferences. So I am familiar, and I wish I could get it, but I teach in a charter high school, and they're always complaining about the budget. So mm-hmm. I'm kind of hesitant, but yes. I still try and ask.
Yes.
Because we really need it, because that's up to today, we were saying that the students lack so much geography skills, mm-hmm. that we said we wish we could teach geography for a term. So,
yes.
Yes.
Melissa, is that Pam's email address at scottsboroschools.net?
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Twice now. It's so close to mine.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I love, Erica, that you're going to bring in the geography as to why battles were fought where they were fought. I mean, if you think about, I know we always are 8th grade history when they start talking about the War of 1812, because we're so close to Havre de Grace, and that was, in the North Point, Battle of North Point, and all these battles, the kids have connections to the places, and they start looking at the map of the Chesapeake Bay and why certain things happened in certain places.
We're in the middle of culture right now, and we're doing state reports, but I really like how your thing about convince me with evidence. I think I'm going to have the students do like a battle of convincing me with evidence why to live in their state. I like that.
Great idea.
Other than just doing state reports.
Mm-hmm. Because it gets them to the justification. And I always tell my kids, there's no right or wrong answer. And then as the day goes on, they're like, we got her to go to like settlement A, and they're like, wait, but she went to settlement B in our class. And then they'll come back, they're like, wait, I'm like, they had better convincing evidence. So it's a fun way to get them engaged without them, writing a traditional persuasive essay.
Right, and they've learned all these new digital tools, so they get choice in their digital tools. So now I'm just going to let them convince me.
And so when I'm in my room, I literally stand in the middle of the room, and as they give me a good piece of evidence, I like take a step or two closer.
Oh,
And
I
then
love
when
that.
somebody else says, but wait, and they'll give me the counterclaim, I'm like, oh, that was really good. And then I back away and they're like, no, we've got more. And it's fun to see them go back and forth. And then the kids are like picking up the article. Wait, there's another piece of evidence I didn't mention.
Which ties in with their ELA class with claim and counterclaim. They've been learning
Yes.
that.
Yes.
I love that.
Well, I love that you all were here tonight and answering in the chat and unmuting and participating. It does make it so much easier and engaging. I miss professional development when I had real people in a classroom and I can move around and, you know, be on a stage. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to learn with us tonight, and hopefully you have something you can take back and use with your students.
Awesome. And this is going to conclude our webinar tonight. Of course, Carla and I will hang around and answer any questions. I have put a correct email in the chat box for if you need a professional development certificate, just send an email to help@socialstudies.com. Pam Gothard is